Hello, and welcome to the Sennheiser Sound Academy's Don't Stop the Education series. This week is Crew Call. I'll be one of your hosts. I'm Tim Moore, along with my teammate from the Relationship Management team, Andy Edgerton. Andy, over to you.
Hi, thanks for joining everyone. This week we're covering what it's like to be part of a touring crew with various different roles. So this week we've got BRIT Award winning #1 album selling UK artist Tom Walker's sound crew and tour manager and drummer as well as guitar tech. So I'm just going to go around the table and introduce everyone. So I'm going to start with drummer Thynne. If you could just take a few minutes just to give us a little introduction, please.
I'm Ali. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, please.
Okay, so hi, I'm Ali. So I started playing drums when I was maybe 13 or so. And then from that, I obviously had to learn how to record drums as well. So I got involved in lots of production and understanding how it was to mic, kit and that kind of thing. So I tried to understand drums and the other side of things from quite an early age. From then, I went to study drums at Leeds College of Music. I did a degree there, 3 years in the popular music. And I'd say from that, I met a lot of people that I could trace back all the work I do now to the people I've met there, whether directly or indirectly. So a lot of those people after LCM, they moved down to London. I eventually followed. And then that's when I started getting a lot more session work with people. So as I mentioned before, I was learning as I went a lot about production and the technical side of things. So that fed into a lot of the work I was doing with session stuff as well. So I ended up doing a lot of programming for people and bits of production in my own time. And it was actually the programming side of things that got me introduced to Tom in the first place, because I was asked to come and help him sort out his Ableton session that he was using for his live gig because it was a mess. So I came in to do that. I had no idea I was a drummer, and I did that with him for maybe a few years, just supervising his tech side of things, basically making sure everything was going to work when he pressed play. Then he started getting a band, so I started saying, hi, I can play drums as well. I started doing that, and slowly over time, we met more and more the people that are here with us now. So I think Dave was the first person from the group that joined after me, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's basically the present day now.
Yeah.
Cheers, Ali. Thanks for that. Well, that's a good segue into Dave, who's the tour manager. So if you could just give us a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Dave.
Okay. Hi. I guess I left school at 16, having played in bands and being like a keen musician up until that point. Would have been about 1998, I think. Showing my age here as the older one from the touring party. But yeah, I left secondary school in 1998 and went to Newcastle College, where I studied music production. I did the national diploma there, and then went on to study the higher national diploma. I think I left there probably around 2002. There wasn't a great deal of work that would have come kind of as a natural segue from what I'd studied. And I ended up working in a guitar shop of all places, just to kind of pay the bills and tie myself over. And it was from working in retail that I was kind of put in charge of the PA department at the store. And they were like, look, we need someone to sell PA systems. And I was like, definitely not as exciting as guitars. It's like, they're boring. Like, you know, they don't come in fancy colors. You know, there's nothing, you know, it's not really the most appealing thing. I was like, okay. And I had a friend who was a promoter in Newcastle, used to put on gigs around town. So I was like, well, look, I'm up for learning a bit more about this PA stuff and, you know, how it all works. Do me a deal on a PA system and I'll buy it from you. And I then went and took it out and worked at gigs for my mate. So I kind of fell into it that way. So just doing like small gigs around Newcastle, and then my first tour came up in 2005. which was with a band called the Motorettes from Newcastle, and I went on. I basically started out as a front of house engineer, and it kind of started from there, really. In 2006, I started touring with a band called Ship Disco. I know we're not meant to swear, but it was a band name, and they kind of, that's when it kind of started to ramp up a bit. It was like Leeds, Reading, we did the new rave tour with Klaxons, so it was all that kind of scene. And then I took on my first tour management job with that band, basically when the tour manager got taken ill. So we had something coming up, and it was like, oh, you know, he's no longer available. Do I know anyone that can do it? And I was like, I'll give it a go. And it kind of happened there. It was like a bit of a natural track, like progression, really, through, not through the ranks, because it shouldn't be viewed as that, but it was just something like, well, would you be up for doing this as well? So, yeah, that would have been back, 2008, 2009, kind of went on for a bit then. And then I took a break for a few years just to kind of recharge the batteries, live a bit of a normal life. And then 2014, I took up a gig with a band called Sunset Sons, who I was with for a couple of years, from 2014 till the end of 16. And then right after that, I started with Tom. I kind of came onto Tom because it was just word of mouth through the label. So I took a couple of months off after work with Sunset Sons, and then it was Sony who got in touch and said, look, if you're looking for work, we've got this kid, we think it's, you know, it could be onto a good thing. Would you be up for it? And yeah, that was crazy to think. Actually, that was February 2017. And it kind of just hasn't stopped. Well, obviously it stopped now, but you know, up until pre-COVID, it hadn't stopped at all. It was like no one took the foot off the gas. It's been very busy, but really good. Very good. Yeah, a very good bunch to be working with.
Brilliant. That's great. Thanks so much. And seeing how you covered PA there and gave us a little history of that, I think it's only natural that we move to Mike next, who does front of house for Tom.
Yeah.
Again, if you could give us a little intro for yourself, please.
Yeah, no worries. I'm Mike. I have been doing sound. Oh, God, I started when I was 15. Actually, when my brother got me some work, working on some massive gigs because he was based in Nottingham, and we did some like really big shows with. It was like after race course, after like horse race course events, and we're doing these big shows afterwards. So we were doing I was doing like Westlife and Bryan Adams and Boyzone and Girls Aloud and stuff. And these are like my first ever gigs. And I was putting the PA up with this company. And I was like oh God, sides of this. And ever since then, really, it was, that sort of blew my mind. I was like, this is amazing. And you watched all these sort of top of the game people, really, that like, I remember Bryan Adams watching their front of house guy and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, ugh. So I did that for a few summers. And then after that, I wanted to get into that, so I did a course in live music and touring production. That was in Newcastle College as well, where Dave went. And I did that, got a degree in that, and after that, I met a lot of companies and venues and stuff around in Newcastle, and they just sort of met loads of people, met as many people as I could, and moved into sort of these different roles. I got asked to do little gigs, tiny little things, started off doing little shows and stuff, and working at the O2 Academy and stuff in Newcastle. And from that, it was just a sort of step after step, really, of working my way up as like a box pusher to like a system tech. And then where do we go from there? Yeah, system tech. And I always sort of watched engineers, and I was really interested in like front of house mixing, and so that was always my main goal. I was like, right, let's try and do this. So everything, I sort of set little goals of trying to do that, and working with like small local bands and doing mad little tours. Like the first ever tour I did, we hired it was an Iveco Daily van, and it had been converted into a sleeper van. So it had like 8 beds in it, 3 high. And you were just like in this coffin laid out in there. And we were driving around. It was in the winter in Europe. And it was so cold. Like we wake up in the morning and all your mustache was all frozen. You're like, why am I doing this? And so we started off like stuff like that and did these stupid little tours. And it was great fun. And then, yeah, just moved on to sort of working with Dave, actually. So the first sort of big sort of monitor gig I got when I was doing monitors, I worked with Dave with Sunset Suns, and through that, I got onto working with Tom really because Dave asked us. So yeah, it's been a fun journey, but I've been lucky and sort of been in the right place. I think a lot of it. It's been really good fun.
Brilliant, thank you. I bet you were delighted when you finally got on a tour bus, eh?
Oh mate, tell me that was one of the worst. It was great fun. It was like a mad experience, but at the same time, just like, yeah, you wake up in the middle of the night in Hamburg or something, just freezing, like, oh, why am I here? What's happening?
Thought of you with a frozen mustache. Tickled me that, Mike. Well done.
Brilliant, thanks. And you mentioned monitors there, so I guess the next place is we'll head over to Liam. So just for the people watching, just because as well we want this to be a bit like a careers lesson as well. There's when you get to a certain level of touring, there's two sound engineers. The sound engineer that does the sound that you hear in the audience, and the sound for the musicians on stage, which is primarily Liam's role. So I'm going to pass over to Liam, let him introduce and say a little bit more about that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Liam. I'm a monitor engineer, or just a self-employed sound engineer. So I've done both, obviously, from a house and monitors. When I first started out, I always knew I wanted to get into some sort of audio role. So I went to college, I studied music technology. Always thought that I'd try and get into studio sound, which I think a lot of probably sound engineers and in the live world probably tried to do a little bit, but it's a lot smaller of a industry, or it's a lot harder to get into, and it's a lot easier to fall into live sound. So that's kind of what happened to me. And I think I started out, I did some local crewing for a bit, gradually ended up working with PA companies, and through working through different PA companies, I ended up working with Mike, and that's how I ended up on the Tom Walker gig, at least anyway. I kind of just knew the people who were working on it, and they recommended me into it. Studied, worked up through different ranks, and here I am.
Brilliant. That's exactly the same route as I took.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously now it's Sennheiser, but when I was engineering, exactly the same. So let's move finally to Ben, who does the backline. I think you need to just unmute your.
There we go. I'm Ben. So I look after Backline, primarily Tom's guitars on the Tom Walker tour. Sort of help Ali and the guys in the band out with odd bits where and when I can. But yeah, I suppose going back to the very start of it, I've been musing on this recently, was when I was about 12. My milkman was banging to his metal. And his band used to practice in this little studio down some steps in Bolton, and he had no desire whatsoever to shift his 4x12 Sound City cab himself. So when I wasn't doing the milk round with him, I was dragging his gear in and out of these rehearsal studios, and I think that was probably my first little touch on a gig. In the meantime, I was in bands myself, and I was listening to bands, and I just we tried doing some recordings, and they never really cut it for me. Not that any of the ones I've done myself ever have either. But that sort of led me into wanting to have a look into music tech, and again, like Liam said, the studio side of things. I think that's where a lot of people sort of look into it initially. I wanted to be able to record my band and make it sound really cool. So I went to St Helens College and did a music tech course. I don't know if anyone who's watching has heard of the Lancashire Hot Pots, but those guys were my tutors throughout that course. So you can imagine how much fun it was, getting our hands on some gear that, we'd never have had a hope of touching anywhere else around where I was growing up. With some really good, knowledgeable guys who made it really, really fun, which I think is a massively important part of what we're doing. Rock and roll should always be fun as much as it's a job and a career. So yeah, did that, and it was only through their encouragement. To be perfectly honest, I was a little bit against the idea of going to uni. I'm not sure why. but they sort of encouraged me to do that. So I went to School of Sound Recording in Manchester and did a sound engineering and design degree. Most of one anyway, because as I got to the end of my second year, there was an opportunity to volunteer on the first Parklife Festival, which was almost 10 years ago to the day. So I went there, took advantage of that, made a point to ask if I could start before they were letting the volunteers start, because since the first time I went to a festival at 14, I had this itch that I wanted to scratch, which was to see, the whole production of a festival from start to finish. So I really wanted to jump on that opportunity and make the most of it. And I guess I have, 10 years down the line, I'm touring, which I think is what I always really wanted to do. But again, as Liam said, I sort of came up from that volunteering position on Parklife. I ended up with a job with a local crew in Manchester. Through being there, I got to see different sides of the industry, all from like site crewing on festivals, to lighting, stage management, working with the audio boys as well. And just, got on with people really well. And, I think I'd pulled a couple of stunts and earned a bit of a reputation. So that led to work for those individual companies eventually, the likes of DBN Lighting in Manchester and Ordial in Manchester, who have now merged. DBN Ordial, great bunch of guys from both camps. I worked for both of those and, tried the full-time thing for a little bit. It didn't really work for me at that time in my life. I think I enjoyed the variance of being freelance and sort of being the master of your own disaster, if you will. And then, I'd sort of, you make contacts through that, get on well with people. I was lucky enough to get bought a really, really awful guitar at the age of 12, which needed fixing 2 or 3 different ways every time you picked it up. So I learned a lot of what I would call poor man's fixes, little ways to get it working in a pinch, which I think have served me really well down the line now in my role as predominantly I focus on guitars. I do drums as well, stage management, bits of other stuff. But yeah, I learned a lot of things from that awful, awful guitar, and I'm very glad that I owned it. But yeah, I think with the Tom Walker thing, there was someone needed cover. Tom's previous tech needed cover for a couple of days, and some messages went round. I guess people know you, and you have this reputation that you carry. So I was really lucky to stumble across this gig, and I've kept with it since. So I'd be the freshest new addition to this team, but thoroughly happy to be here. Lovely bunch of chaps.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much.
Great to have you too, Ben.
Feeling the love. We'd just like to all everybody watching, there is a Q&A section down there. Please get your questions in. We have a team on the call that are going to field those questions and make sure that they all get asked. So one thing that you all said there, which I noticed, is a lot of you either went to college or uni. So anyone watching the webinar now that is kind of in that position where they sort of coming towards their end of the studies, or they're in the middle of the studies, and they're thinking like, how can I take that next step to get into touring? What would be your top piece of advice, if you like, from where you were at that point? Obviously, I know, Ben, you said you went to Parklife and sort of got stuck in, and Liam did some local crewing. Is there any other kind of bits of advice, like maybe working at a local venue, or any studying that maybe help, or something like that?
Can I answer this one?
Yeah,
just from because I moved from Lincolnshire, like a little rural town, into Newcastle, which was like the first sort of big city I'd ever really been in properly, because I'm a farmer's son, so I was not really used to big places. But I found from being at university or being at the college and being around like those institutions, they're very well linked through the industry. And I was always the sort of I don't know, it sounds like such a geek, but I was always the one like sort of last in the class after everyone else had left. And they'll be like, if we had a guest speaker or someone come in, I'd sit and wait, and I'll be like, right, I'll go over and talk to him, because I knew I had to make these contacts and these sort of face-to-face interactions with people. And and it paid off. And
Yeah.
I find that was like the biggest part of me, even over the education side of it, because meeting those people, and they'll give you an opportunity of just some mad opportunity of something like just go into their studio or warehouse or something like that, and you go, all right, cool, yeah, and you turn up there next week, and then it's just those little steps, those networks that I found was like for me, that was like the biggest part of the education side of it. It was the contacts that I made, not necessarily the education, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I also think you need to take the opportunities that are there. So I remember when I was in college, there was like they did plays, they did like band nights and stuff, and I'd always volunteer to do the sound for it out of anyone in the class, because you need like to get the practice in. The most you can do to learn your craft better is like you can study as much as you want, but you also need to practice it so much. So I'd always be straight up. Like if there was like a play going on, I'd do the week where you do rehearsals after college time and all that, being the sound guy for it. And just because the more time you spend behind the board or in the computer doing mixes and stuff, if you're trying to be a sound engineer at least, that's you learn more from practicing doing those little the things you study about, you read about. You need to do them, even if it's unpaid. If you're doing it after college, out of hours, you got to dedicate a bit more time to it. It's so much more worth it.
Yeah, totally. I think adding to both of those points, specifically one that Mike said, almost more than an opportunity for education, for me, being in Manchester was the thing that did it. There's so many venues in that city, and it just allows you to, having the facility to live there through, the student loans company, essentially, allows you to be that much closer to things and to be that guy who can get that last minute call and you're just round the corner. So just being around it as much as you possibly can in whatever way, going and watching your mates play gigs and, helping, you can learn how to build a drum kit and how to look after one just by doing that, and you can have a couple of pints while you're at it. There's a million and one things you can do that are really enjoyable that will fit you out with like a bit of a skill set that you can carry through to something else, I suppose.
What about you, Ali, from a point of view of like a programming side? Is there any advice for like, obviously if someone's at uni or college and doing their sort of set modules, if they want to get into programming, something like that, is it just a case of getting some programming and just constantly keeping at it and trying different things?
For me, like I first got into that through sort of the necessity of, I'm a drummer, so recording a drum kit isn't easy to do. If I was a guitarist, I probably would have just been able to plug in my guitar into my computer and be done with it. But I can remember at secondary school taking like this Yamaha 24-track thing with a ADAT cassette in it home and working out how to record my kit with that. And that's how it was a necessity that made me learn how to program and how music tech works. So I never really went in with, I need to learn this. It was always something that followed along parallel to everything I was doing. But if it's something that you want to do, it's just a case of doing it. Like, pick your software, learn it really, 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 really well, so that anyone that comes to you with any problem, you can fix that problem in that software. So like, I'd say I know Ableton as inside out as I can, but I'm also very aware that it can do so much that it's limitless basically. But as long as you can get to any possible solution with your software, that is very, very helpful, I think. It's just a case of doing it. It really is a case of doing it.
Yeah, and just becoming an expert in that field, I guess. Which
exactly, because I never meant to do it. It was always necessity that drove me to learn this new thing about, for me, Ableton. So like the amount of terrible YouTube videos I'd sat through trying to figure out how to do some obscure thing, but then at the end of it, I know it and I can carry that. And I've used it a million times since then.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great advice for all those sort of at the start of their journey, if you like. So let's jump into like crew life a little bit. So I'm going to start with Dave, because obviously as the tour manager, he's the one who sort of puts everything in place. So how does that initially start, Dave? I guess, does the manager get in touch with you, who, you know, he sorted something out with the booking agent and a tour's kind of been scheduled in? What's the kind of next steps after that?
Yeah, so I guess that I work, I guess my position is between the booking agent and management, and I kind of, they're the two who I kind of report back to in terms of what we're doing in gigs. There's a label as well, but the label don't really get involved unless it's promo or, you know, like publicity, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, traditionally how it would work is the booking agent put the tour in place and say, this is what we could, you know, this is the route, this is how much money we're going to get. It then gets passed to management. Management then would pass it over to me, and then it gets budgeted up. And it's like, that's when you kind of have to work out all your variables and cost everything up, and just you then go back to management and just say, yeah, it's going to cost you. They're like, oh yeah, how much money are we going to make? And you're like, you're not making any money. He's going to lose 20 grand or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And yeah, and it's kind of then just goes back and forth. The management can then go back to the agent and say, look, we need more money. And sometimes they're fortunate enough to be able to do that. It's not always the case. But yeah, and then in terms of crew, how it happened with Tom, it was just a bit of a natural progression. Like Mike mentioned earlier, I'd worked with Mike previously, and we were both up in Newcastle at the time. So I kind of, I recommended Mike. He came along, absolutely like smashed it out of the park. And then it just went from there. We got Liam through Mike. And yeah, it just kind of grew organically, really. We actually have a production company as well who work on our stuff with Tom. So we have a company in London called Proper Productions, and they also, I mean, to be honest, they do the bulk of the budgeting and all that side of it now, because it's grown into a far bigger beast. But yeah, I guess between myself, management, label, and the production company, we just kind of work on it constantly behind the scenes and just kind of make sure that it's all taken along as it should be, I suppose.
Brilliant. There is a question that's just come in actually, and someone's saying that obviously you all know each other pretty well, but if you kind of starting out and you don't, you know, it's kind of your first gig or something like that, how can someone get onto a gig without sort of really knowing anyone? I guess it's putting yourself around, as you've just sort of explained.
Yeah, I mean, it's that funny thing. A lot of I feel like one of the big misconceptions about the music industry is the size of it. I think it's seen to be this huge thing, but actually it's a lot smaller than a lot of people think. And so much of it is word of mouth. So if you're, it's kind of like what Ben was touched on earlier. It's like, if you just take all the opportunities that you can and get your name about, that's, you know, a lot, as I say, a lot of it comes from that kind of thing. I jumped onto another gig a couple of months ago. It was the last thing I did before we went into lockdown. And again, that was just a word of mouth. I didn't know anyone on it. And, you know, it's that funny thing, because all the lads were ripping me through a bit, actually. And they were like, what are you going to be like when you go on this other tour? Like, you're going to have to really, like, act like a normal person. You can't just be, like, wild like you are with us. I was like, oh, yeah. New Dave, yeah. But, you know, it's great. And it's kind of, I guess, when I jumped onto that, it was the first new thing I'd done in a while. And you kind of just sit back and listen and learn the behaviors of the people that you're working with. And then you kind of know where you are to fit in socially. And it just kicks off again. But yeah, a lot of it's, I'd say a lot of it is word of mouth. Just make sure that you're always doing a good job, and hopefully you'll always be the person who gets a phone call saying, are you available for this, that, or the other kind of thing. I rambled a bit there, sorry.
No, it's great.
I just got a phone call from Tom's manager halfway through that. I was like, Simon, I'm on the call.
Well, maybe he's like, don't say we lose money. Don't say we lose money.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in trouble.
By the way, that was hypothetical.
Sorry, I think Tim's got a question.
Yeah, it's kind of comes from one of the ones we got online, Justine Thompson, who worked with you guys, I think, in 2018.
Yeah.
But he's got a question that kind of comes to mind for me, and I came from touring as well, did tour management. And Dave, this one's for you. It was always an important question for me. And how important is it, and how do you kind of look at finding the right personality for the right fit? Let's say you have two very qualified people for either, whether it be a band gig or a crew position. How do you work through that? Because the show and setup is half the day. The rest of the time you're on the bus moving down the road and you have to get along. So
Yeah.
how do you make those evaluations?
Okay, it's interesting now because it's almost like it almost gets into a bit of character profiling, doesn't it?
Tread carefully, Dave.
I know. We've got this little scouser right now. I'm only joking.
Everything's bolted down in it.
It also, what I will say about this as well is that it certainly doesn't just fall onto me to make this kind of decision. It's definitely a group, because we are a team, but I wouldn't like to think that we're like a closed off insular team. It's not like that. I'd like to think we're not a cliquey bunch. But yeah, when a new person comes in, it's kind of you just have to kind of assess how it is working and just check in with the crew and the band as well as you're going through it. And you can then start to get, you can sense quite quickly if someone's not quite right for it. Yeah. And we've been quite lucky, really. We haven't really come across too much of that, but it's a tricky one because, we're a crew of like 15 or 16 now. And when a new person comes in, you can't expect that to be like an instant that you can't make that judgment straight away. So I guess really it's like anything. It's like, if you go for a job and you get like your 3-month kind of probation period or whatever it is that they call it, you know what I mean? And after that, they'll decide whether or not they want to keep you on. It's a similar thing. I guess a similar thing does happen with touring. And, I'd like to think we're quite an easygoing bunch, really. So most people should get on with us and we'd get on with them. But yeah, I guess it's a trial and error thing, really. There's no.
That's why word of mouth is so important, isn't it?
So this goes.
That's the unfortunate thing about having the way that the industry works and getting referred from other people. Is because that's such a major point, is that living with someone, you need to make that you're mainly going, they're all right at the job, but they're definitely not going to annoy everyone. You know what I mean? Because I've already worked with them. I know that the sound, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate. It's not because they're like, you could like, you're obviously going to be good at your job as well, you'd like to think. But the main reason I think personally that word of mouth is such a massive part is to do with the personalities on tour. More over anything else.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear in Nashville is the word of mouth thing is good news travels, but bad news travels a lot faster. So be careful of the things you do. And that's the first thing I hear a lot of people say when they come into this industry. So.
Totally. It's not just knowing the right people. It's when those people call you up to do the job, you do the job really well, rather than you have to actually be good at your job as well.
Right. Good. Thank you.
How did you find it, Ben? Because you're the newest part of the. I think you came in pretty well.
Awful, truly awful. No, it's been golden, to be honest. Like, I've been really lucky in the past couple of years to start working with some new artists and, by extension, bands and crews. Last year was absolutely glorious. Like, I've said this to a few people, but it was nothing but sound heads from start to finish. Just like, really nice people, like professional, hilarious, respectful, caring. There's a lot of intrapersonal stuff that goes on a tour bus, like, as I'm sure you guys know, and some people who are watching, you're in closer quarters to what are essentially complete strangers when you join a new gig than you have ever been to your own family. at your closest. So I think, like, you know, for me, I'll always try and be like respectful, and you know, nobody wants to go in like totally gung ho and sort of dominate things with a personality straight away. But you know, you just pay attention to, you know, what interactions other people are having, and get a feel for. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but get a feel for the vibe of what's going on, and then, you know, work out how you can fit into that. There's, you know, as people have already said, you've got to have your skills on point. You know, you can't be walking in and doing a poor job of things. So you've got to have that you know, that base knowledge and ability to be able to carry out the job well. And then beyond that, just, you know, a fully accepting sense of respect for what's going on around you and the people around you. And then once you've worked those two bits out, if you can get a giggle out of someone, I think you're all right. I mean, that's kind of right. Really. But, yeah, these guys are great. Like a really lucky thing to stumble into last it was October, I believe.
Yeah.
Again, and that's, you know, that was a call that came to me indirectly through other people that I've worked with before, who have a confidence in my ability to put me forward for the gig. That's an important thing with making these connections. You know, they've got to know that you're going to represent them well, because when you recommend someone, it's not only your own reputation that's got to be maintained, it's that of the person who's put you forward. So, you know, that happened, and I went and did some shows, and we keep doing shows, so it must be going pretty well. But yeah, great bunch of people to work with.
I think that's a really valuable point, what you've just said. It's not just your reputation, it's the reputation of the person who's put you forward for the gig as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really important one. So let's move on a bit more sort of the technical side of things, and I'm going to jump to Ali, because obviously you're in the band and sort of on the stage they're playing. So your relationship with these guys then, can we speak a little bit about that? Because obviously Liam, you work with to get you, I suppose you're on in-ears, are you?
Yes.
You're on ears, yeah. We've got a question actually about in-ears for you, Liam, in a minute.
Ooh.
Someone's coming with one.
One of them.
Oh God.
So let's talk a little bit then about how maybe like in the band you would work with Liam, and Liam, how you work with Mike to make sure that things are kind of right for out front as well as on the stage.
I mean, I guess everyone has their own sort of system of how they make it work.
Yeah.
Like who's going to take the lead in line checks and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a specific thing. But
yeah,
I think what's important is everybody sort of understanding what everybody else's job is and what they've got to do, more so that when something goes wrong, which it obviously never does, but just in case it does,
it's Ben's fault.
No one's looking to someone's like, talking about you guys. But well, I've got, for instance, we had a problem with power in a venue, in an Italian venue, and the monitor desk went down. And if we didn't know potentially the things that could go wrong, we'd just look at Liam and be like, what the hell are you doing? Why?
Or the lack of Liam.
Or the lack of Liam, yeah, because Liam on the board desperately trying to fix stuff. But the fact that everyone's very aware of what everybody's workload is and the things they have to do, we're there to help them. You need to understand it to be able to allow them to do their job, to then be able to help them out if you need to, rather than just be like, I'm just the drummer and everything outside of my world is somebody else's problem. It's never going to work if it's like that. The other thing as well is, because I'm doing so much programming, it's really important track-wise to get levels sorted, and that's a lot of conversations between myself, Liam and Mike, because obviously all the same audio is going out, but we've got to make it so that the things we're hearing on stage, everyone's happy with, and the things that are happening out front, everyone's happy with. So there's always feedback after every gig as well. We should change this, we should do that.
Yeah.
And
that's a sort of, it's a never-ending process, isn't it? Of
exactly.
Like, of just going, that was a few dB louder this time, and because stuff might sound good in the headphones, but when you put it through a PA, like sonically a tambourine or something like that, you're like, when it comes in, you're like this mega tambourine coming in, you're like, right, that needs to come down for the next show, and like, yeah.
And it's getting that balance between what Mike wants out front and what we want in our ears. And there's always a way of making that work. It's just, we might not be aware of something. So it might be a level thing, or it could just be a tiny little EQ thing that makes something easier for Mike out front. Because if we're sending all our percussion down one stereo pair, but the tambourine's too loud, that's something I've got to fix. That's not something Mike can do. And it might sound completely fine to us coming back in the monitors, or somebody else might want something else up. So you've got to bounce between everyone wanting to hear different things and making everybody be able to hear what they want to hear.
Yeah. And I guess the key to that is the communication. That's what I pick up from there. Yeah, it's just
understanding if someone can't do something because it might just be impossible. It's like, well, I understand the limitations of what Liam or Mike can do out front. So I realise maybe some of those things are my job to fix. Or
it's always worth having a conversation about it. Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, it is.
I don't think anyone's ever pointed fingers at anybody along the line and been like, why have you done this, or why is this not the way it is? It's usually like always posed as like a question, and it's usually what can we all do about it? What could, and then we all go through different possibilities. Maybe it's something that changes on the monitor board, or maybe we figure out that it's something that Mike needs to change as well. And if the band are hearing things that Mike also doesn't like, that goes to say that it's probably like maybe it's a track issue.
Yeah,
and then we try that, and then maybe it works.
Yeah,
I think we've all got a common sort of thing. We always want it to sound the best it can, and that's our sort of we'll work around. We all, if there's a problem been raised, and we all try and circle that together and be like, right, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make it better? Because, like, for example, Tom's guitars, he used to have these two Fender, DeVilles, when they 2x12s. He had two 2x12s on stage facing out, and he used to do quite a lot of like backgroundy sort of rhythm playing. So it would just be him strumming, and he would have it quite low in his ears, but on stage you'd be like, wow, and it would be blasting out. And when you're playing smaller venues, like 1,000, up to like 1,000 cap really, and you just be going, well, that guitar's loud, isn't it? And we tried so many things, turning them around, and Tom sort of wanted to feel it. And in the end, we've got this isolation cab, so the amps and all the noise just goes into these cabs off stage now. And that's been a game changer. And we sort of worked and tried to get Tom on board. And now because he always wanted to feel the guitar, now we've got this vibration board that Liam uses, which he stands on. So he gets the bottom end for his guitar weirdly through his vibration board, and his amps, you can still hear it, and his amps are off stage, and I'm happy, and everyone else is happy because they haven't got this like blasting guitar. And that solution took quite a while to get around to, loads of different sort of.
There's a lot of different things that got tried until it got to that point.
Yeah.
But again, though, that all comes from communication, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone was able to sit down and chat about it like adults and be like, look, this is going to work, that isn't going to work, try this. You know, if when we first started working with Tom, if we turned around to him and said, Tom, in 2 years' time, we're going to have your amplifiers off stage in this box, and you're going to be stood on a pad that's wobbling your legs, he'd be like, you're all fired. You're all fired. But, you know, it kind of gets said, isn't it? It's like, you just have to, it's a trial and error thing.
Well, the thing I managed to crowbar in recently is having a nice big sub next to me on the stage.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't go to Liam or Mike and go, I'm going to have a kick wedge now, let's sort that out. It was like, how about we try and put a sub next to me and see if that isn't going to make your life hell kind of thing. Because I know that's something that could create all kinds of problems on stage. So I wasn't going in demanding this is something we have to do. I'm aware of how the changes I want to make are going to mess everybody else's day up. So come at it slow, I think.
That's really interesting.
And it feels great now.
That's interesting, Ali, as well. Like just the relationship between like you and Liam. What do you find? Because it's not often this. What's great about this webinar, we kind of either have like all monitor engineers or all front of house engineers. But just as a musician, what do you look for when you look across the stage for monitoring? Oh, brilliant!
He's always got his back to me.
Well, the great we're lucky to have so much time beforehand in rehearsals to get stuff so close to perfect that we don't need to change much. So most of the stuff we're changing on tour is like, I fancy making this sound a bit different today to see if it's better. So the conversations, this is usually in soundcheck, not on the gig, me and Liam will have a lot is, can we make my second snare drum sound bigger and fatter. And we'll try a whole bunch of different things. And this isn't affecting out front at all. This is just for my own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. But then on a gig, it's like the only time I'd ever look at Liam is if I want to pull a funny face.
Oh no.
Oh no.
It sounds
Oh no.
that day.
What's going on there?
Or if something's gone horrendous, they'll look over and Rocky Mountain anyway. Oh
I think we
no!
lost you a little bit.
Sorry.
Did it disappear?
You
My
went
connection's
very,
unstable. Did I go
very
to
slow.
robot?
Will.
I'm sorry if I missed something.
Where did you get me to?
You were talking about
it's-
something catastrophically failing.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Gazza, why didn't you catch that? Come on.
I think
Yeah.
you ran yourself through the tape machine for delay.
That's what it was. Too much saturation. Too much saturation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, no, I don't like. You do want your monitor engineer to have eyes up, so when you look over, they're there ready to
Yeah.
catch you. But
Yeah.
that's not been the case. And also, we have talkbacks on the gig as well, which is
Yeah.
so helpful. So we can talk to everybody else on stage, and I can talk to, or we can all talk to Liam and ask him for things without
Yeah.
having to be like waving our
Yeah,
arms and saying
like-
up and down and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Kind of breaks the illusion a bit.
That's
And I
good. It
think
sounds
that-
like you've got. Sorry,
pro-
Liam.
the heart. I think when you're all on in ears, when you're doing in ear mixes, because most of the time there'll be really busy mixes and there's quite a lot of work you need to do in them, compared to wedge mixing, where you can kind of set it and leave it, and you don't really need to talk about mics because you'll get a little up or down finger. Because there's so much going on in the ears, you kind of almost need a little bit more than like a sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it get, yeah, I think you kind of need the talkbacks for that.
Because we'll be asking for
Reason,
more
yeah.
content on a snare, or can I have a little
Yeah.
bit less low end of the bass, which you can't sign. It just doesn't.
Yeah, if everyone was on wedges, mate, you probably wouldn't need that sort of like just waving and pointing around at instruments and stuff.
Yeah.
Just makes it a little bit more elegant. And I'm always quite busy doing stuff, no matter how much practice time we've got. There's a lot of like automation in my brain I know I need to do during the gig because I've done it so many times that I can't logistically do unless I have 600,000 scenes. You know what I mean?
On top of that as well, like we're a relatively small team on stage. You know, there's other artists that we've all worked with that maybe have like another one or two backline techs and a system tech as well, perhaps, and that can make those sort of communications a bit easier. You know, you can dive away from the drum kit and pass those notes on to the monitor engineer or whatever. And that's not a situation we're in at the minute, so having those options is really helpful. You know?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I'll just stay with Liam quickly. See, there's two questions coming for him, and I think you've just about
Popular boy.
popular, but I think you've kind of touched on one there though. It was like, can Liam talk about the challenges of moving from wedges to IEMs?
Yeah, a lot less problems with feedback, which is always nice. And like we only have 2 wedges on stage that Tom that we only really use for when he's doing acoustic, like him and his acoustic guitar. So that, and because of like the lower SPL out front as well, it means the stage wedge volume's really low. So even then I don't really have to deal with feedback that much.
And I get that's helping Mike as well, I guess, out front. isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that means, yeah, obviously it's better for me because I don't have to deal with feedback as much, but it's also better for Mike because the same thing, feedback, stage spill, like it's completely gone. The difficulty is that it's a lot busier. There's no ambience, there's no stage sounds to blend into your wedges. It's just complete isolation. So the mix has to be a lot more clinical than you would do with wedges. A lot of the time you can get out the amount of gigs I've done on wedges where I've just put high pass filters on things and that's it. And like it's been enough.
Yeah.
Like you can't really get away with that in IEMs. There's a lot more to do. So that's the challenge with it. Is you have to go more intense. Makes your life easier in certain ways, but you've also got maybe 6 musicians that all want every single instrument, and because it's available, there's almost that expectation of hearing it as if it's so close to record quality, in the sense that it like they want it to sound like a record, compared to wedges where everybody knows what the wedge vibe is on stage.
Yeah, I guess it's because you're putting that detail into someone's ear, aren't you? And it's
You've
like,
made it possible, and then once you go there, you can't go back. Really, I don't think anyone who's like used IEMs for an extended period of time gigging will really want to ever go back to wedge mixing.
Yeah.
Or sorry, performing just on wedges when they know they could have had stereo.
Yeah.
Stereo in ears.
And the second part of this question is, do you keep all the members on the same sort of brand of in-ears? Like, do you like everyone to have the same, or
It would be ideal, yeah. At first, we didn't. There was a few people using Cosmic ears at first, and I had them, but some people had different brands. Then we all recently got some, like most of us got JHs, but it's still a hard one because especially if everyone's getting them purchasing them themselves. If you wanted a set of the JHs, maybe it's quite a lot of money to front up front. So it'd be nice because I have now, for everyone that doesn't have the ears, I have a set of ears that are matching what the other band members that don't have those ears are, and I'll just have to basically mix in one and then cross-reference what that mix sounds like, and they always sound totally different. All of the ears will never sound the same, so then I just have to try and make that mix sound good with like master bus EQ and compression maybe, or something, to what I thought I heard in the rest. So ideally everybody would be on the exact same IEMs, because that's an extra step you wouldn't need to do, which is reference it across 3 different types of IEMs.
Yeah, it's a great answer. There's quite a few questions coming in for you. We could do a Liam Shannon webinar.
Right. Should we just log off?
Goodbye, everybody.
I'm going to pass over to Tim because he's going to field a few of the questions that have been coming in.
Yeah, one of the main ones that I think that's important that a lot of people are curious about, the talkback system and how you guys deploy it. Do you have all your tech mixes are all on the talkback? Dave, do you have a way into your radio for the talkback to get to you, or are you using a body pack as well? Just curious how you guys deploy that whole setup.
Right now, we don't have Dave on a radio in the tech mix, but the setup is basically I use a matrix to feed both my Q bus, so what I'm soloing on the console, and then I also feed in a shout bus from that and into that matrix as well, and blend them together. And then I obviously during so that I get everyone every time. The shout bus never changes, so that I'll, even no matter who I'm queuing into solo, if I'm soloing on an instrument, I'll still get any one of the shout mics. But because the band use the talkback mics to communicate during the show as well, and also talk to me, a lot of the bands have different people in their ears during the gig, but during sound check, everybody needs to be being able to communicate with each other. So that's why I use a shout bus, because I always listen to the shout bus, which never changes, but the mixers may say Ali, he gets muted in 2 people. No, Ali, because Ali's in charge of the tracks and everything, he never gets muted, but say Pete, who plays pianos, he'll be muted for everybody except Ali and my shout bus, so that when he's asking me for something, it's not going to Tom, or it's not going to Sam, who plays bass, for no reason, and maybe distracting him.
We use these handy little things as well. I'll just hide the brand there. But the little foot pedals. So the mics. So they have a mic going in and a mic, or the cable going in and the mic going out. Oh no, the mic going in, the cable coming out, and a little foot switch. So the band don't have to stand there flicking around with mic switches. They just press and shout and just carry on. They're very useful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. just so everybody with a vocal mic has that switch, and then if you have people who aren't singing, you just have location-based mics set up on side stage, or what's the situation?
No, they'll still have a mic stand with a hot shot. Just because it's always open, and that maybe that works as a manual gate for them at least, so that they can just turn themselves on. It's always open. It certainly means less automation muting stuff happening in scenes that I don't need to happen. But there's also an interesting point is that I was speaking to a couple of other engineers on the last tour that do a very similar shout system to me, but they were having quite a lot of trouble hearing microphones so they'd miss a lot of requests from the shout mic because maybe the mix is a bit loud and they couldn't get it loud enough. So I haven't done it yet, but I probably will implement it on the next tour we do. Just they sidechain duck their mix via the shout bus, so that whenever anyone shouts through the bus, it ducks their solo cue bus so that they don't miss the shout call, which is obviously a great idea. Even better.
I also have the shout system. I have this. It's just stupid, but I have a big speaker, or it's like a mini speaker at front of house next to me. And sometimes when I forget to turn it down at the start of the gig, and you hear them and they start shouting because they're playing, and I'm just stood there with this speaker blasting in my face and just going, "Shout out, turn this down!" And that like happens. I always forget, and it's. Yeah. So remember that. You have a speaker in front of house, and all the audience like turn around and look at me thinking I'm just shouting, which I'm not.
In the really quiet intro, building up tense atmosphere.
And then
more track.
Yeah.
Or just telling jokes.
It makes you jump out of your pants.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That is the main reason for the shout system, is just jokes between the band members.
Embarrass me. Yeah.
They've probably been used.
As many words for milkman in as many foreign languages as possible.
Yeah.
Show.
They're also quite a good drinks ordering system. I know when I was touring, you'd see a wave or something, just be like gin and tonic.
Dave's very good for that. There's always a beer waiting for us when we come off stage.
Yeah, top tour manager.
We had an audience member come had figured out that people were using shout systems one time, and they had a body pack and they were just listening into Banner the whole show. They figured out how to tune in.
That's
like,
amazing.
oh boy, we're gonna have to encrypt this stuff now. Cool. Andy, I'll go back to you. That was the one I had.
Brilliant. Yeah, there's another one actually coming from the audience, and I guess he's working for a band, but he's doing quite a lot of roles: backline, front of house, tour manager, and monitoring. So I guess he's doing monitors from the front. They're looking now to kind of expand their crew. What is the natural expansion of a crew? I guess I'll go to Dave for this one. So like the first sort of roles that once a band gets signed, how do those roles sort of build up? Because obviously front of house can do monitors at the start, and would you get a backline or merch or what?
Yeah, because I guess it depends. Yeah. It's going to depend on kind of the trajectory for the artist in terms of the size of the venues that they're doing. Because as nice as it would be to throw a monitor engineer onto the gig, you might not be in those size venues for another like a year down the line. I would probably put backline on it. Would be my first move. And the reason for that is so that it then affords the artist the luxury of not having to go and do their own line check or sound check on stage when the audience are in there. And it's just an extra pair of hands on the stage, which I think is essential really when you're at that level. It would definitely be backline and then monitors. Merch is a good one. Merch should not be overlooked. Especially with the way that revenue is kind of made or not made nowadays in the music industry. If you can get a merch seller on there as well who can chip in with the driving and stuff, then great, because they're gonna, if you've got a good range of merch, they're just gonna pay, that's gonna cover their costs anyway. They'll end up just, that will just pay for them to be there. But I mean, initially what I would do is I would go backline and just get an extra pair of hands on the stage that can do the changeover with you while you're at front of house. that would be my suggestion. And then monitors when it becomes applicable.
Mm. We did quite a long time though, just me and you though, didn't we, Dave? Because you looked after the TMing and backline, so you were you were those eyes on stage, and I did the front of house and monitors and backline.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing, isn't it? To ask whoever it is who sent the question is like, ultimately, which role do they want to fill? Do they like just being a tour manager? Do they actually enjoy doing the sound? Would they rather be a monitor engineer? Do you know what I mean? It's like if they're kind of in there now and they already have that gig, then they could maybe mold it around them. Like which part of the gig is it that riles them up or gets on the nerves or that they need help with, and then select it that way. I mean, you get plenty of backline techs who are tour managers as well. So maybe they just want to add someone else to look after front of house. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I would just get an extra pair of hands onto the stage and then work it out from there, really.
And have some of you kind of gone into kind of having one specific role, but had to adapt and do a few other roles? So like you said, Dave, you did backline, but were you ever a backline tech, or did you just have to have that conversation of being like, listen, I'm going to do the backline and everyone has to sort of chip in?
Yeah, it's never a role that I've professed to be able to do professionally. I've never said, oh yeah, look great, I can do this. I'm a qualified backline tech. But I just know quite a lot about the gear from having been around it for so long. So I kind of understand how things work. And like going back to what Ali, when we first did like our introductions, when I came on board with Tom, it was just Tom and Ali. And then me, and it was like, oh, it was tiny, and I guess, yeah, and then then we added a front. By that point, the technology kind of surpassed where I'd left off, kind of thing. When I used to be a sound engineer, so I was like, you know what, I'm not going to attempt to get back into this because it wouldn't be fair on anyone. So yeah, you just kind of adapt, and then as you get the opportunity to be able to add more people, you just do it in the way that was logical. So that's what we did. We got Mike, and then we had backline and monitors come at the same time, and yeah, but it's money as well, isn't it? That's the other thing. I mean, it would be great if we could have just started off and put 15 people on the gig straight away and just gone great, but it's like it's not how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said there, how technology has sort of jumped forward. I guess since everything's become digital in the last sort of decade, how do you guys, and Ben included, like, because I know a lot of analog stuff is becoming digital on guitars, like modulators and things like that. How do you kind of stay current, if you like? Do you go to like console training days, or do you get into shops or demos or trade shows? How do you sort of keep your education up, if you like?
Ooh, I still try and keep my eye on just through websites and releases from brands and manufacturers. I just try and keep my eye on it and watch and to see how when things are released, to see how they go down in the sort of in forums and things like that. But personally, I never really touch anything unless it's been out for like a year at least, really. And if I'm going to bring it into our show, so I'd like to just keep an eye on stuff, and because stuff changes so much when you get in with some desk manufacturers, you get in a revision of the software every few months, and you're like, right, and you have to keep on top of that, else if you don't change the processes you're doing, you'll turn up to a venue with a stick and be like, right, and try and plug it in. They're like, oh no, it's nope, not today. And you're like, and you're running around. So that preparation, you have to be prepared and know what sort of stuff that what changes you might come up and face in the sort of the industry. So, but that's the only way I keep up with it. Is just staying online and seeing what other people are talking about, and going maybe speak to a manufacturer and go down to their warehouse if they're based locally, if you have any time off, or you're allowed to go there nowadays, and just have a look at the stuff and just be like, all right, see, and then it's just, yeah, it's having a poke around, isn't it?
was going to say, I feel like you're quite proactive with that. Like you were doing quite a bit of that towards the end of last year. You were like, oh, look, I've got a couple of days off. I'm going to go down to so and so, and then you would, I'm going to say, oh, you little geek. But really,
is it?
it's a good thing to be doing.
I've always seen it like that. I've always been like a bit of if I've been in a conversation with someone like a peer of some sort, and they've said something and they've named like a brand or some sort of process, and I've gone, oh yeah, that thing, that right, and then I've gone home and like, what is this? What are they talking about? And then I'd sit at home and try and work it out. Then I learn enough so I can talk about it and maybe explain it to someone. And I'm like, right, well that makes sense. And then I feel I've just gained that knowledge from feeling a bit stupid in front of someone, but then I've been like, right, I really should know this if I'm going to be the sort of the not the top of my game, but if I'm going to be able to compete with the people that are the top of the game. So I think it's having that active interest in it as well, not just seeing it as a job, but seeing it as like a I don't know what to
You've
say.
got to be a little bit nerdy, haven't you?
It's a bit of a nerd,
yeah. Because you've got to actually enjoy it, and so. When there's like new console releases and that, you do like you think I'd love to have a play on one of them, and you've got to actually like that's the nerdiness aspect of it. The being a bit of a techie is that you're like, oof, this new thing's coming out and being genuinely interested about it.
Yeah.
If you're not interested, you're not going to keep up with it, are you?
Yeah. That's it. I mean, I did a similar thing, with the rise of like, or rather I suppose the resurgence of like digital amplifiers for guitars in particular. There'll probably be a couple of people who rip me for this, but I'm going to mention Kempers again. Like I love those things. And there was a point at which I found myself working with a few different bands whose guitarists had like recently made a switch over to them. And in like to an extent, I suppose it was driven by like sort of, like Mike was saying, an element of me feeling a little bit out of my depth with something that I'd not properly got to grips with. I'd not seen it, and I'd not given it a poke and see what it did. So I bought one, and I've played guitar for years anyway. So switching my amp out for that and getting to know it, both gave me something to do when I was at home, which was really good fun, and sort of equipped me with that knowledge to be able to get a little bit, I had one in front of me, so I could really get inside it, and was able to like make suggestions to guys that were using it, that make them aware of functions that they weren't currently aware of, and just get to know it through that. But again, it was that, like Liam was saying, it's one thing getting to know it, but I really wanted to, because it's what I'm into. Like I think like the vast majority of us are major nerds at the end of the day, and that's a commendable characteristic. It's a good thing.
That's good. It kind of links in with Ali as well, I guess, because that's technology as well. You can use MIDI to change off the track, to change guitar settings and things like that as well. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah. The last tour we were doing a decent bit of that, having Tom's guitar pedals, at least one of them anyway, changing patch per song and per section of song.
Yeah, it was the Strymon Big Sky, wasn't it?
Exactly, the Strymon Big Sky, yeah.
We had the monitor console scenes.
We also had the monitor console switching per song as well.
Really?
Yeah.
So that was stuff that the idea got into my head, and then as we've all just confessed, we're all nerds. That was like what I need.
It's like 5 weeks into the tour as well.
So
you're just like, what can we do to make us to keep us interested?
2 weeks of tour unbearable every single day.
Funnily enough, didn't it stem from what at the beginning of this? Ali mentioned how the monitor desk lost power, but it wasn't the monitor desk that lost power. It was the IEM rack.
Yes.
From the UPS.
Yeah.
So I still had power to my monitor desk, and then eventually, when we powered everything back up, I was still fixing stuff, and I couldn't flick the scene. It passed my memory to flick the scene as the song had changed, and I was still like at the back of our monitor rack fixing things. And then they start the next song, but the next song, maybe I've got channels muted on it that should be open. Yeah. And then it was like, well, if anything like that ever happens again, to avoid me forgetting about it, can we use MIDI to trigger all these sends? So if I'm trying to fix something, the console's still rolling itself.
Yeah.
So that's what we ended up doing. Yeah.
From Liam, because you're still doing all that automation and stuff. It's just there.
Yeah. It's basically to save that ever happening again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really smart though, isn't it? And that those conversations that you've all had between you there from all the different roles, how you can all sort of interact together and get a solution that works across everything. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
There is a danger of going too far down that rabbit hole as well, though.
Yeah.
Being like, oh, so we can
Yeah.
control the whole gig via MIDI. And
Yeah.
then it's like, it gets to the point where it's
Yeah.
like, maybe
we should just.
yeah, we can still play our instruments.
That's still.
Well, yeah, like in like as a further into that, like, you know, you always still need like a very physical sort of mechanical backup wherever you can.
Yeah.
With all of these things.
Yeah.
So as much as, so, you know, the sort of automated system like that, you know, you can automate Kemper from MIDI. You could have that taking time code from the same source and doing changes for you. But on the off chance that it doesn't get it at the moment, you still need the big red button to, you know, run over and give it a good smack and get it playing the game again.
Yeah, but that's it. I always had a button that was just like it turned the function on or off. So whenever I needed to leave the desk, I'd just turn the function on. I'd always run it manually. But we had it set up, so I just turn it on if I had to leave the desk for something. Because we don't have a monitor tech.
You don't want some random MIDI firing out and changing the scene in the middle of the song either.
Yeah, exactly. And it on the console I was using, it'd fight against you if something was wrong. So obviously it was like fail safe button more than anything.
Brilliant. I think we've highlighted though that how each individual role there sort of works together to find different solutions and all sort of interact with each other. That's great. We've only got 20 minutes left, which I can't believe. I'm going to jump into some of the questions, mainly about experiences of touring. So we've covered quite a lot of technical, quite a lot of career things. So we've had a question in which is, what's the most difficult thing you've experienced about touring? And what piece of advice from your own experience would you share to a newbie? So maybe some mistakes or some things you maybe have done different or something like that.
In terms of advice, I mean, the thing that kind of, and I guess this loops around to what we've all just, how that conversation's just happened there, and the way that our processes work. Is the most important thing for our team really is like communication and kind of accountability. And accountability really just kind of boils down to being reliable, because I feel like when you make someone accountable for their actions, you kind of effectively teach them to value their work, and it builds trust, which is totally key with what we do. But it's totally a two-way thing. So it's like, it's all very good when you've had a great day, getting on the bus and you crack open a beer and everyone's like, yeah, that was brilliant, fantastic, well done. But in the same breath, you've got to be able to flip that around. And when something's gone wrong, you need to be able to kind of own up to it. And rather than shift the blame, just kind of own it and just be like, okay, well, this, it wasn't the day today, something's gone wrong. We all then sit around and talk about it, you put a system in place, and you'll find that problem then goes away because everyone communicates. That's like the big thing that I feel that we all do really well. Luckily, we don't have to have that conversation very often, but as the show has grown and there've been more elements added, we have come across up against hurdles along the way. And it's communication is like the biggest thing that I would say that we do when we go on tour. And it's like, no one is ever going to be, stand there, pointing a finger, shouting at someone. It's like, that's not, at the end of the day, I'm not in charge. It's Tom. Tom's the guy who pays the wages. It's like, we don't rule by an iron fist or anything like that. But definitely with our lot, it's just all about communication and just looking after your station. I'm trying to think of like an actual instance where something's been.
Droppers in it, yeah.
Yeah, I remember actually. I remember being in New York in 2010 with a different act, and we were there when that volcano erupted in Iceland, and we were trying to get back to the UK, and we turned up to JFK, and British Airways were like, "Oh, yeah, your flight's definitely cancelled. We can't get you out of here." And it was like, okay. I'm like, and you're not going to be able to fly for like the next 5 days. And you're like, okay. And there was like a sellout tour that was starting like 3 days, 3 days later. And I was like, okay. So there are no flights anywhere. And they're like, oh no, we could fly you to Iceland if you want to go there. And I was like, where the volcano is? Like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And what happens when I get there? And they were like, well, we don't know, because I don't know how long it's going to take you to get there. And I was like, okay. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I just turned around to the band. I was like, you know what? I've just got a feeling we should do this, because geographically it makes sense just to get closer to home. And it was one of those like stupid calls, but we did it, and we flew to Iceland, and we got there. We're like, hi, yeah, we're trying to get to London. They're like, yeah, we can't get you to London. It's like, oh. Like, we're going to be stuck here for days, aren't we? And they were like, well, if you want to go to London, yeah, but there's a flight that's going to Glasgow that leaves in an hour if you want to get on that. And we were like, yes. So then we got the flight, got ourselves to Glasgow, got a ridiculously long train down to London from there. And that was like, that's always something that sticks in my head. It's like, that should have just gone so west. That should have been a disaster. It should have been a cancelled tour and us stuck in America. But yeah. I mean, other than Ali, I feel like you were going to say something when I was like, I can't think of anything bad. I felt like you were going to go, do you not remember when?
Yeah, it's not a story. It's just a gig. It's like it's playback. It's when playback goes wrong. But that's kind of. I mean, it shouldn't ever happen, but it happens every now and then. It's not your fault. We got a whole new playback rig, 2 brand new MacBook Pros. Lovely radial switcher, loads of nice interfaces, and it worked perfectly well in practice. And then the first gig we did, which was in
the Reeperbahn.
Yeah, Reeperbahn Festival there, and it just started jumping around. It was in Ableton. It just started jumping around the project, and it was an absolute nightmare. And the first time that happens on a gig, it's like, you then cannot trust it for the rest of the gig.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point where it just went so wrong, we just had to stop it and finish the rest of the song with it. But that was a point where I was sat playing, and I had 2 laptops to my left, and I was able to try and fix stuff. That made it even more stressful, because then I was having to try and do these 2 jobs at once, and it just felt like the whole world was just crashing down around me. And I mean, I don't know what the moral of that story is, because there's literally no way of predicting what could happen.
Then we bought simpler playback units. That was it.
The moral of the story is
spend less money.
Threw the MacBooks away and then bought simpler ones. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we've just got like things that play off a tiny little SD card like that, and they've never gone wrong.
Touch wood.
I think. Yeah, touch wood. Right. Yeah. I don't know. More with a laptop and an interface and all that kind of stuff, unless you've got a guy looking at it and checking that, there's so many points of failure there that you're kind of asking for problems a little bit.
I have a mate who has that job, actually.
Yeah, if you've got a playback thing, you can get away with that, I think, definitely.
And every time I see him, he's just stood at the side of the stage, and there's like a bank of laptops there on all these cases. And he's just like staring at these screens, just sweating. It's like, it's like, what are you doing? It's like looking at the Matrix. It's like,
yeah, you need that big red button.
Not that's what you need while this gig's on.
You need that big red button that's just fix everything, and then everything goes back to normal. Yeah,
brilliant.
I actually feel like I just lectured everyone there. I didn't mean to do that. That was like some kind of life coach lecture. I've just realised. Can we delete that bit?
No, it's all good. It's all good. Well, that was the question, is like, what were the experiences, like some things that have maybe gone wrong, and how can you sort of learn from them? And I think you've all nailed it there. Things go wrong on gigs, but I think that it's that process, isn't it, of making sure it doesn't happen again, or putting a process in place where it can be better next time.
Yeah. Well, everyone could have blamed me very easily for that playback thing, because I was in control of that, and that is my you technically did. But it wasn't. I felt terrible about it, but no one like held it over me or anything like that. And it's the same thing we had with like Shazza's the power going down on Shazza's thing. It's like no one was mad at Shazza for that. I keep
Yeah,
saying Shazza to Liam, we call him Shazza.
Yeah.
Things happen, don't they? And I
Exactly,
think, you know,
exactly.
you've got to have the integrity to admit that something's like within your department, and that maybe
That's it.
you haven't been as aware as maybe you could have been, but that you've identified the points at which things went west, and you're going to have a good look at them, and this is what I'm going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again. And like, you know, best laid plans and all that. Something, if it's going to go wrong, it'll go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And all you can do is like between all of you, through, you know, good communication and like level-headed discussion, is, you know, try and work out ways of you know, getting rid of that possibility.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. And another, jump into another question about, you know, experiences on tour, because you all spend so much time together. What does the social side of it look like? Do you have like card schools, or do you go
Roadie Friday?
Roadie Friday. Explain what Roadie Friday is to the viewers.
We've had about 2 bits so far, haven't we?
But we've really jumped in there, haven't we?
Yeah.
So your Roadie Friday is basically when you know that you've got your day off coming up. So it's like your weekend.
Yeah, it's any day of the week. Really doesn't matter. But you're not doing a gig tomorrow. No, it's just Roadie Friday.
Yeah, because you're always gigging on a Friday.
Yeah. So your Roadie Friday could be a Monday night or a Tuesday night. I mean, with like.
And it gets rowdy. If there's a full moon out, it gets even rowdier.
It does, yeah. Yeah. 10-pin bowling seems to be our thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. Shuffleboard. We love a good shuffleboard.
Yeah. There's like in America, the best thing about. Okay, it's not the best thing about touring in America. The best thing about touring in America is doing the gigs. But the best thing about downtime in America is just finding a little pool bar and just going and having a few beers and just playing pool. It's always just such a laugh, isn't it? It's just like kind of let your hair down.
Meet the locals.
Playing English rules.
Yeah. Get very confused with who you're
Smoking
playing and what kind of rules that they're playing and all that kind of crap. But I guess it's like just 10-pin bowling. That's the thing.
Wholesome.
We got hold of some of those little electric scooters as well a couple of tours ago, which meant during the day people could zoom out and see a bit of the city and stuff like that.
I actually felt like,
I think,
I thought that was a real turning point for the way that we were touring at the time as well.
Yeah.
I felt like when everyone got those scooters, it just gave like mainly obviously the band, but just the freedom just to go out and just get away from the venue for the day. It's like,
you don't normally get, well, it depends where the venue is, but you can be often a long way out of town, and we had the scooters so we could get into town in 15 minutes. And you can go with mates or you can go by yourself and you can get a bit of time. Just like, doesn't really matter where you're going. Even if you just go for a walk or something, that was really nice and relaxing. And you just, that kind of thing really helps. I find that helps like my mental state much more if on the gig afterwards, if I've been out during the day and not just gone from the bus to the venue and not seen daylight for the entire day.
Pitch black venue.
Yeah. Wind in your hair. Scooter running out of battery, like the jeopardy. It's good.
Am I gonna miss the gig?
Yeah.
Phone battery's dead.
Did you ever have to send a runner for someone who got stranded on one of the scooters?
I remember scooting back on one and running out a fair few miles from the bus and having to push it all the way back. It was very tiring. It was very tiring. Yeah. And I only realised when you got there, you could change the resistance on the wheels because obviously the wheels are trying to charge the battery. And I got there and realised you could just take that off. So I made it twice.
And have you got any like one piece of kit that you must take on tour with you? Is it headphones or a coffee maker or?
Mine's definitely headphones. No, good quality noise cancelling headphones are the best investment I've ever made in my entire life. Like Screaming Baby on a plane, see you later.
Yeah.
Everyone having a rave on the bus when you just want to sort of get your head down because you're knackered. See you later. They're a really worthwhile investment.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Screaming pillow.
Screaming pillow.
Yeah.
Screaming pillow.
Screaming pillow.
Screaming pillow.
Screaming pillow.
when something has gone wrong and you need to just quickly let off some steam, scream into one of those.
If you like, you could demonstrate that, Dave. Just
Not right now. I couldn't. I haven't warmed up.
Go on. It's a sight to behold.
Headphones. I think headphones and just like an iPad or something you can just watch.
Yeah.
Just
I've
like
got
it's like a little home comfort, really, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I've got this
Gather your
amazing, like,
setup in the bunk.
amazing, like stiff gooseneck tablet holder that I use on a bus tour, so that it like you like it hand screws onto your bed, clamps onto the sides, and you just put your tablet up, and it's like having a nice big TV there, just right in front of your face, and then when you finish, you just like push it away and it's gone. That's what makes my life good. So you can just sit there watching Netflix.
That is a great one. I used to just
Yeah.
put the Velcro on the back and stick it on the roof. But inevitably,
it's on a gaffer
it's
tape.
coming down at some point. Yeah.
In the face.
What about you, Mike?
You know, weirdly, all I can think of is like my bed, like my sleep routine. I have a little iPad and stuff, but I have. This is a Sennheiser plug here. When you buy IEMs, you get those IE4s, those little ones that go in your ears, and I can't sleep without them because you can just put them in your head, you go to sleep, and then by the time you've woken up, the cable's usually wrapped around your neck, around your head or something, but you just don't notice them coming out your ears. So if you're wearing other things, you're just going, you have to wake up. But those are just great, and they just knock me out every time.
Yeah. Strangle, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's us out of time. I just want to say thank you so much. I think we've all learned a lot, and it's amazing how you guys interact together and solve problems and work together. I think it's amazing, and I just want to thank you from Sennheiser for joining us and sharing your experiences with us. And
thank you
very
Yeah.
much. I'm going to pass back to Tim to wrap up and tell us a little bit about some of the webinars coming up and things like that.
All good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you guys for joining us as well. It's been very enjoyable. Thanks to David and Kevin in the background. They're here every week. We really appreciate it. Next week, we'll be doing the same kind of thing. It'll be crew call with Blake Sheldon's team. Blake Sheldon, known for The Voice here in the U.S. and large country artist, and pretty funny group of guys that'll be on. So please join us for that. And we appreciate all the audience coming and all of our guests. And all of these webinars can be found at Sennheiser.com/webinars. And don't stop the education. Thank you guys, everyone.
Cheers,
so much.
guys.
Really
Thank
do
you so
appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.